Happy Wednesday to you. I hope you're doing well out there. Today I'm continuing with my little mini-series on pups and pregnancy, and I want to discuss today what are the causes, or what we believe to be the causes of dog attacks on infants and small children. Why would a dog attack a child? And knowing this, again, good news or bad news, depending on how you look at it, this can help prevent it. Knowing the cause of any behavior is one of the first steps on either modifying the behavior or preventing the behavior and stopping it altogether. So I'm just going to kind of go over today some opinions and some science behind what we believe may be driving dogs to attack children. Because again, even though fatalities in this country, and again, even one is too many, but a lot of people will claim, well, it's only 15 to 20 per year. Again, that doesn't matter if your child happens to be one of the 15 or 20. But there are thousands upon thousands of children bitten every single year, and they have to go through reconstructive surgery. And I pointed out before, physical and emotional trauma that they suffer, some of them for the rest of their lives regarding the attacks. So today I kind of want to just give you an idea why a dog would, because again, so many people, they just don't believe it. They can't believe that a dog would attack a child. But it has happened, and it does happen, and that in itself is proof that dogs will attack children. Whether you figure out why it's happening, at some point becomes the back burner. And then the front burner becomes preventing it from happening. But again, you know me, I believe in education, and I believe in going over things so that people have a really good understanding, just a round knowledge of what's going on. Because again, that's what happens to us. We have a hard time buying into something if we're confused by it. A dog, if it's confused by anything, will either avoid it entirely or they simply won't respond to it. And humans have been known to do the same thing. In fact, there's an old mantra in business: don't confuse the consumer, because the confused consumer says no. So that being said, we got a lot of similarities. Okay, so when I talk to people all the time about aggression, when they come to me and their child has been bitten by their dog, I start to point out a few reasons why it can happen. But one of the things I run into all the time is that so many people believe, again, not scientists, people, okay, science still backs it up that the dog is a subspecies of the wolf. And so many people say, well, the dog is so far removed from the wolf that it's no longer a wolf. Well, yeah, some dogs don't have pointed ears and long legs and can travel 100 kilometers and make a kill and then travel 100 kilometers back to where they're going. And many dogs, if they're going to travel that distance, they have to ride in a car and go through a drive-through window. But granted, there's many mechanisms that still drive dog behavior. And that's another Facebook Live day. That's a day in which I'll devote probably an entire day or two just talking about that. But when you talk to experts like Dr. Stephen Spott, he will say things like linking a dog's whine with what seems to us is frustration, yelp with what surely must be fear because a comparable signal would be fearful to us, is not a fruitful approach. The insistence that behavior and biology are inseparable might seem frustrating to those who only measure behavior's visible aspects. However, mechanism underlies expression at every level, and behaviors ignore this truth at their peril. Mark Durr, who wrote the book, How the Dog Became the Dog, From Wolves to Our Best Friend. No one should be surprised that the dog bridges two worlds, the world of domestication and the world of the wild. Indeed, the dog lives in a border zone between states. This is a major reason dogs are so valuable in our lives. They connect us to a world outside of ourselves and our categories. Yet ours is not a society that deals well with ambiguity, ambivalence, paradox, and border zones. And so the tendency is to cleave the dog from its wild side and lament the contradictions we have created. It is enough to drive a dog to ruin. Okay, so for those of you who believe the dog is so far removed from the wolf and insist that the dog is more human-like, let's turn to one of my favorite authors, Edward O. Wilson. Absolutely love Edward O. Wilson. One of the most prolific writers about sociobiology, biology, ecology, ethology, you name it. Incredible genius in his field. And in this book on human nature, which I highly recommend, Chapter 5 on aggression. Are human beings innately aggressive? Because see, if dogs aren't aggressive because they're no longer any sort of instinct or any sort of underlying mechanisms or expression from being a wolf, then what are they? What are they? Are they little people in fur coats? So if they are, why are they still aggressive? So now we have to address aggression from the human angle. Are human beings innately aggressive? This is a favorite question of college seminars and cocktail party conversations, and is one that raises emotion in the political ideologies of all stripes. The answer to it is yes. Humans are innately aggressive. Most modern countries in this world have spent half of their developing time to rise to that modernization in war. In war. Half of their entire existence has been spent in war. Edward O. Wilson goes on to write, like most other mammals, human beings display a behavioral scale, a spectrum of responses that appear or disappear according to particular circumstances. And one of the circumstances I'm talking about today is infants, toddlers in the household. That is a circumstance. A behavior can appear and disappear depending upon the circumstances that the mammal finds itself in. He goes on to write, because there is a complex scale instead of a simple reflex-like response, which is usually associated with animals, psychoanalysts and zoologists alike have had an extraordinarily difficult time arriving at a satisfactory general characterization of human aggression. They would encounter exactly the same difficulty in defining gorilla aggression all the way down to tiger aggression. Okay, so what that means in sum is this. Aggression is there. So if you don't believe a dog still holds wolf instinct, and so therefore that discounts aggression, then what does it hold? Because like I said, the very fact that we have statistics, we have children in graves, we have children walking around with scars and adults walking around with scars, proves that dogs do bite. So now we're going to move away from the human spectrum because that is not why they attack. They've never been a human, so how in the world can they possess human-like instinct if you've never been the human? That's non-debatable. So let's move on down the road here just real quickly. So I put out in books that I've written, many seminars, webinars, a lot of teaching, that basically can be very frustrating at times. But dogs are extremely predictable animals. They can be under certain circumstances. So that being said, the ones that we know are simply this. These are the times in which we know an animal to be aggressive. One is predatory. Predatory in nature. I'm just going to write a big P up here. Okay, predatory. Now, some people in the behavioral world, sometimes just will argue that predatory drive is not aggression. But again, I would argue, like many other scientists do argue, that if you're the animal being attacked, you may differ in that opinion. But we don't need to be splitting hairs or splitting fur at this moment. Predatory, because that is definitely the cause for many of the attacks to children. It is the only one that we can hang our hat on in many of these cases. In other cases, it's different. But predatory is one of those. And what happens is that when you bring a child into your home, and it's the first time the dog has encountered a child. Now again, many dogs have had many children come to home, and by the time the second, third, fourth, fifth arrives, well, they got it. It's not a novel circumstance any longer. But do remember, anytime an animal encounters a novel environment, a novel circumstance, a novel object, the first thing they try to do is seek out the rules of prediction and control. If it's a novel object, what can I do with it? What can I do with it? Is there any survival value in this object? Can I throw it? Can I chase it? Can I shred it? Can I push it? Can I toss it in the air? Can I chew on it? Can I eat it? Yes. So when babies come home for the first time for a dog, that is a novel object at that moment. Don't count on them interpreting or ever even figuring out on their own during those first few days that that's actually a living thing. And definitely don't hang your hat on the fact that you think that they will think, oh, it's a baby, it's a small human. Why would they? Most puppies, by the time they open their eyes and encounter humans, were standing fully upright. We're upright. Most of them are. Some, of course, can be raised with young children that are crawling across the floor, but most puppies, when they open their eyes, they encounter a breeder of sorts or some sort of animal caretaker who is standing upright, a biped, towering over them. That's what they're used to seeing. Then when they're purchased or they're adopted or rescued, they're taken to a household in which they encounter, for the most part, while they're young and they're imprinted, adults, bipeds, standing tall. They're not carried away and put into a crate or a pen with a baby. That usually doesn't happen. So there's no knowledge, there's no imprinting. And therefore, if there's no knowledge, no printing, no learning, no mimicry, then I operate off of innate releasers, off of instinct. First, till I learn. That drives the initial behavior, then there's cause and effect. Okay, so again, just follow me on this real quick. I always kind of like to use the example of a pendulum. A pendulum. The biggest danger that occurs in the beginning is right when the child comes home, because the child is swaddled away in clothing and blankets and little outfits that don't have arms, they don't have legs on them. They're tiny, they're wrapped up, more cocoon-like. There's most dogs, if they've never encountered that before, they have no clue what that is. So again, now all of a sudden you could enter into some sort of object, mis-ID for a toy. And I want the toy, and I'm used to playing tug-of-war with something that looks like that and has that kind of shape. I'm also used to shredding. If you give Captain, my cattle dog, a squeaker toy, well, I'm here to tell you, you might as well just consider you just gave him about 5 minutes of entertainment. Because the first thing he's going to do is dismantle that thing, shred it to get the squeaker. He wants the squeaker. Like most dogs, they're hunting a mouse. There must be some sort of living creature inside this stuffed thing. And they're going to shred it. And then once they're done with that, the squeaker's out and it doesn't squeak anymore, they either ignore it, they're done with it, or like Captain, he likes to play fetch with himself. He'll throw it and go get it and throw it again and then go chase and keep that up all day long. Hence why we don't like to give him anything hard in the house, because it'll ricochet off your forehead or off of a window. But again, so when the child first comes home, because it is, we believe represents an object of some sort, well, then you run the risk that the animal will treat the child like an object. So there's real danger in that. Hence why they'll jump into a crib and snatch a baby out. They'll jump into a playpen and snatch a baby out of a cradle. Tack them right out of a swing while they're swinging right next to you. Even out of your arms. I have a couple sad stories I'm not going to share today. To talking to clients, that's exactly what happened. The dog snatched the child right out of their arms. Okay, so an object. Another thing could be predatory in the sense that, from not just from object play, but predatory in that I do think it's alive. I see movement. I see things flailing. I hear sound. Wow, what looks like that? What sounds like that out in nature? Is it a squirrel? Is it a rabbit? What is that? Is it a cat? What is it? And therefore, a lot of dogs will inadvertently mistaken that the child is some sort of prey and just attack it. Just go after, especially dogs who have a very high prey drive, dogs that are hunting dogs, dogs that are just inherently driven to go after prey. So that's one of the reasons. That's why when the baby first comes home, the pendulum's way over here where it's dangerous. It's very dangerous in the beginning. Okay, now, part of that is making sure that the animal, we'll talk about that tomorrow when the baby actually comes home. I'm just kind of moving through the aggression scope now. But then all of a sudden this pendulum will swing fully, typically about the time the child starts to crawl. Now all of a sudden, we've had situations in which dogs that were attacking children when they were in arms, in cribs, in cradles, but now suddenly are mobile. They have locomotor tendencies about them, the abilities about them to move across the floor. Now all of a sudden we've had dogs, in cases of dogs, that don't attack the child, but darn near attack everyone who gets near the child. Yeah, and it's typically female dogs that do that, not male dogs. I don't personally and professionally I've never encountered a circumstance in which the male dog, most male dogs don't contribute anything to the rearing of offspring like a male wolf will do. That's one of the differences between a dog and a wolf. They just don't contribute anything. But mom will. So a lot of female dogs will attack anything and everything that they believe, they perceive in some way that there's a threat to this crawling pup. So it must just take on some sort of puppy-like image to the animal and ignite some sort of, or trigger some sort of reaction to the animal, some dormant gene, inner gene, whatever, reproduction, aggression, what have you. But again, the danger seems to kind of wane a little bit when we get to this area in which the child is crawling. Okay. Then all of a sudden, the child stands upright. Oh, this is when it gets really dangerous. Really dangerous. So now the pendulum will swing right back to that danger zone back over here. And the reason being is, again, innate responses, mechanism, expression underlies all behavior. When you stand upright and you can look me in the eyes, you're no longer a pup. It's very difficult for dogs until they're taught by a small dog to interpret that that is an older small dog. They have to kind of learn that. They just learn that. And then when they're taught that, when they go and pick on Mr. Jack Russell and Mr. Jack Russell lets them have it, then they go, whoa, okay, well, tell you what, you may be small, but you're mean and mean counts. So therefore they back off. And animals will do that and they will learn. But again, it's part of the learning process. But when children go upright, they're typically, by the time they're walking and moving around upright, they're either eye level with most dogs, if not taller. And that can throw a dog into what's called the principle of resemblance, a situation in which they interpret this creature as older than what it is, more capable, having more resource holding potential than what it had when it was crawling. In other words, a child can suddenly shift to an opponent. And so now we call that competitive aggression. I'm just going to draw a big C up there. So predatory, competitive. The law of limited resources. Competitive. Now it can become one of those situations in which I have something and you're approaching me. I want to keep that something. And trust me, that's what dogs do. It's all a matter of value. A funny little story is 2 of our dogs are Morkies. I've mentioned them before, Dave and Poe, about 10 years old each. Poe's all of about 5 pounds, but she's a little producer. Yeah, her personality is producer. She is very courageous, very headstrong. And the other evening, I dropped one of those little Chinese fortune cookies that you get when you order Chinese food. And it hit the floor, and before I could snatch it up, Poe grabbed it. And she ran off with it. Well, due to the fact that there possibly was some fortune in it, and I didn't want her to swallow that, and some of the wrapping still on it, I commenced to take it away. As I approached her, I told her, out. Well, I might need to work on my out, because it didn't happen right then, as it normally would 99 out of 100 times. So I just kind of bent over a little bit just to see what was going to happen here. And sure enough, I got feedback. And the feedback was, you reach for this Chinese cookie, and I tell you what, I'm going to take your finger off. So look at me. Look at that little thing. The value of that fortune cookie was so great to that dog, it was willing to take me on. Okay, so I raised the signal and said, okay, no, that's pretty good, but tell you what, out. And as soon as I changed my voice, she spit out and left, because now all of a sudden the scale switched. She realized that the cost that she would incur trying to keep that was not worth the benefit, and immediately gave it up, and all was great, and I snatched a fortune cookie, and she didn't get to have it. So again, if a 5-pound dog will do that to me or do that to you, what do you think they're going to do with this small child moving across the room? At least I knew what I was up against, and I was prepared for it, and I took precautions to make sure I didn't get bitten by this little dog. But a child won't, not always. And so therefore, they go and approach a dog who has a toy, maybe their toy. A dog has food, a dog has anything that it has placed enough value on. And once I have value, then remember, I will immediately try to assess your resource holding potential. What are your fighting abilities? What is your fighting experience? In other words, can you take this from me? And if I don't think you can, then I'm going to defend it and keep it. And even if dogs cannot accurately assess the resource holding potential of the other living opponent, they can assess their own. So let's just run a quick assessment, a quick cost versus benefit analysis. And when they come up that the benefit of keeping this is greater than the cost, guaranteed that's going to happen. Now all of a sudden there's going to be some sort of action to keep that valuable resource. So always keep that in your mind. And don't try to differentiate between toys. So many people do that. Okay, wait, here you go, little Max dog. These are your toys. These are Timmy's toys. No, don't do that. Don't do that. That's very difficult for a dog to be able to discern, and you can cause all sorts of issues. We'll talk about later on about how to handle that situation right there. But don't think for a second that most dogs in the very beginning are going to learn that this is my toy and that's your toy. No, you're right. This is my toy and I want your toy too. Yeah, I want them all. Why settle for one toy when you can have all 10? Okay, so competitive aggression, be careful with that. That would probably be one of the number one causes of aggression as soon as the child starts to stand upright. And it makes sense. It's about the only time you really can enter into competitive aggression. You have to be able to move some. But it can happen, it does happen in babies that have been attacked, that were crawling across the floor because they're crawling in the direction of a dog who has something of high value. And so the dog attacks. Okay, so then the last thing I want to talk about is really kind of self-defense. Self-defense. Again, you get all sorts of comments on these videos that I do, and a lot of people use an opportunity to basically be extremely insensitive and unprofessional. They use my videos to do that. Kind of brave when you're on a keyboard, you're not really in person. But someone made a snide remark that protect the dog. Yeah, that's exactly what I meant, protect the dog. So many dogs are incredibly fearful of young children. When they see this thing crawling, they don't see a pup. They don't. Just like not all humans see the world the same. They don't see their circumstance the same as you would see it. That's why we came up with words called paranoia, depressed, suicidal, manic, OCD, many other terms that we use to describe their viewpoint and how they respond to the exact same environment that you're in. It's different. So for some dogs, a child crawling towards them is fear. It's a threat. It's not an opponent, it's a threat. A child running in their direction wielding a lightsaber that they got for Christmas, it's a threat. A dog that finds itself under a coffee table, up on the sofa, in any sort of situation, they perceive that they cannot flee from this thing. They can't get away from it. Then again, I've told you before, in the critical zone, options are now taken away. Remember, I have 3 options. Hawk, attack immediately. Dove, 2 options under dove. I can either display, and display is visual, auditory, show my teeth. You better back off, you little kid, you're starting to scare me. But if you ignore that, and the other option is flee. If there's inability to flee, and the perceived inability to flee, then you can guarantee that flee gets taken out of the equation, you're only left with 2. Attack or display. And if display fails, attack is imminent. You can hang your hat on that. That's exactly what will happen. And so I'm about not just protecting children, but protecting the dog as well, which then in turn, as a consequence, protects the child. But don't think that dogs will always see a child as something harmless, because they don't. In fact, the vast majority of cases I've worked doing canine pharmacotherapy, I will tell you, it was fear. It was fear of that child that led to the aggression. And most of the cases, and I've researched the vast majority of cases and fatalities that have occurred in this country over the last 20 years, I am here to tell you, in the vast majority of them, I would willingly say, don't quote me on my total accuracy on this, but just from having read and written my notes and prepared to write a book about dogs attacking us, I would say over 70% of the attacks that occur to children occur from fear. It was something that I just had to do to save myself. So self-defense. So again, predatory, competitive self-defense. The pendulum is in the danger zone. The second you bring the child home, it gradually works its way to a less dangerous zone. As the dog becomes more familiar with the child becomes more predictable. Remember, when I have predictive information, it gives me control. When I have social support from both the parents, the adults who will protect me, who will then control me, who will then give me defined boundaries of behavior, that will make me feel better, that will keep my stress response suppressed. And also, when I have an outlet for frustration. Hence why I talked about yesterday, you're going to want to teach your dog to walk with you and a child, whether you're holding a child's hand or the child's in the stroller, but you need to get out and you need to play with your dog. And you cannot just ignore your dog when a child comes home. You have to give them an outlet for frustration. Or the child could end up being the result of that because I have a heightened arousal column, and because I'm way up here, the threshold of aggression is right here above my head, then I can react quickly and suddenly. And under other circumstances, like Edward O. Wilson said, I would not. I would not. So guys, that's really it. I could talk about reproductive aggression, and I did talk on it briefly, but it mostly has to do with female dogs. It has to do mostly with female dogs that had puppies in the past, not so much female dogs that were spayed when they were very young and never had the opportunity to raise offspring or have to protect offspring. And that's why I just don't talk a whole lot about that, because in this country, thank goodness, we're very good about neutering and spaying our dogs. But it is typically the female gender. And then of course, there's other factors that come in, and I don't want to spend all day on this video. I got things to do and I know you have things to do, but something else to think about is that most of the dogs today that did descend, all the dogs descended from wolves, and at some point along the way, over thousands of years, we introduced artificial selection. We kept traits from wolves that were advantageous for us, had some sort of value to us, whether it's working value or aesthetic value. Nevertheless, we kept some of these traits because we wanted them. And in some dogs, we kept aggression. We wanted a dog to be aggressive. For whatever reason, whether it's a war dog, whether it's a dog that you would use to fight in an arena back in the days, for whatever reason, or whether it's like a cattle dog like Cat, and hey, the way you motivate cattle to move, an animal that outweighs you probably between 800 and 1,500 pounds, is you have to inflict some pain. You have to give them a reason to start moving away. Otherwise, they're just going to ignore you or even attack you. So we kept aggression in some dogs. And of course, when you look at fatalities, they're the dogs that create most of the fatalities. So there is some innate aggression, just like in humans. We are naturally aggressive. Dogs are naturally aggressive. Wolves are naturally aggressive. Not all the time. In fact, probably 98% of the time. They're not very cooperative. They're social animals. We're social animals. Not everyone's attacking everyone all the time. But again, it is in us. Even stray dogs that were, again, kicked to the curb back in the Bosnian and Croatian War, a lot of studies have been on them. How did they survive? What did they do? They found that they did a lot of what's called surplus killing, and wolves have done the same thing. They've killed 9 elk. 9 elk. 8 wolves killed 9 elk. And they eat part of 1 elk and leave the rest. And sometimes they kill animals and don't touch them at all. Dogs have killed people. Dogs have killed other dogs. Dogs have killed livestock and never touched it. Never touched it at all. It's just something driven, primordial, that's in them. I just got to kill. I have to do it. I just have to do it. I have to let this out. Well, don't let your child be the thing that your dog chooses at that moment to let it out. So keep an eye on that. So if you have a dog that was, through artificial selection, has the ability to be more aggressive than other dogs who we kind of said, no, we really don't want that aggression thing. Let's kind of just be a little calm. How about if you just kind of carry something softly in your mouth? How about if you just sit on my lap all day long, make me feel better? Yeah, different. All dogs can bite. All dogs will bite. I documented that. However, there are some that have the capability of actually killing. So we, of course, pay a little bit more attention to them than what you would the smaller dogs. Okay, that wraps it up for today, guys. I can talk on this for a week, and it probably seems like I've been talking on it for about a week. If you have questions, reach out to me. I'll be glad to answer them for you. Tomorrow we're going to talk about what do we do once the baby is now home. What do we do with our dog? What do we do when this baby starts to move around, what kind of precautions do we need to take? What are some things that we can do then? Okay, so we already talked about a month before the baby comes home. We've talked a little bit about aggression, why it can happen, what are usually the causation behind a lot of this type of behavior. Tomorrow we talk about when the baby comes home, and then we'll just wrap it all up probably on Friday and move on down the road. Move on. I got some major topics I still need to cover before the 365 is over. I want to cover canine nutrition. I want to talk about canine pharmacotherapy. And I also want to talk about some recent studies that have come out about canine behavior and just kind of lay them out there. And again, at the end of the day, we get to train our dogs the way we want. And then we get feedback from that. And hopefully we all learn from our feedback. Okay, guys, that's it for me. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great training day. And if you have a small child, pay attention to these videos. Share it with anyone that you think maybe soon about to deliver a baby, has a new baby in the house, never had a baby around the dog before. Maybe you've had multiple babies, but this is the first dog you've ever had. Whatever the situation is, if it's a novel situation, make sure that you share these videos on pups and pregnancy with someone. And let's see if we just keep a child from being bitten, and worse yet, from being killed. Enjoy the rest of your day.